In chapter 26 of the Smart Sales System, we talk about prospecting on LinkedIn. And the agenda for this module is we're going to talk about finding prospects on LinkedIn, how to reach out to those prospects, some email message do's and don'ts. We'll provide some email templates, and we will provide some call and meeting scripts. And so just to get going, talking about finding prospects, I actually don't want to go into detail about how to search and look up contacts. I think it's intuitive enough. You can figure that out, or you already know that. But I just want to point out a couple things. One is, I personally believe LinkedIn is one of the best places to go to find contacts and prospects. One of the reasons why is there's many different databases that you can subscribe to and get contacts and get contact information. One of the things I like about LinkedIn is that I believe that it's one of the most up-to-date resources for contact information. And the reason why is because contacts are motivated to keep the information up to date and update their own information. For example, when someone changes jobs and let's say they get promoted, they want to share that update and that good news with their network, so they are motivated to update when they move from one company to another, one position to another. And for contacts that haven't changed jobs in a while, maybe they want to change jobs and they're motivated to update their information so that they can be found by recruiters or advance their career through networking through LinkedIn. So there's a lot of reasons why the information gets updated, and those factors don't really apply to some of the big contact databases where there's millions of contacts. That data can get out of date very quickly. So I really like LinkedIn for that reason. And in a previous Smart System module, we talked about organizational movement, where when you can't get a hold of your target contact, you can move horizontally or vertically in the organization. And one of the great tools that you can use when it's time to move around the organization is LinkedIn. So you may have a contact in your CRM already that you're pursuing, or maybe you buy a list. When you can't get a hold of that contact and it's time for organizational movement, a lot of times that list that you have or the database that you're working in does not have the new person that you should try to reach out to. LinkedIn is one of the best places to go for that. Plug in the company name that you're trying to get into, and you will likely find other contacts that you can then pursue and perform your organizational movement. In addition, so if you have a geographical territory, LinkedIn's a great place to plug in the region that you're targeting, and you're likely to find businesses that you had never even heard of before, and you can now pursue those and add those to your target list. So it's a great resource. Let's move on to now talk about how to reach out to the people that you find on LinkedIn. And just to kind of simplify it, there's a few different ways to reach out to the people you find on LinkedIn. So the most common thing that I think salespeople do is they send an invitation to connect. You find someone on LinkedIn, there's a big button that says invite to connect. You can send an email through LinkedIn to the LinkedIn inbox to contacts. You can also send a traditional email, an email to the contact's business email inbox or their personal email, basically their inbox that's outside of LinkedIn. And you know what? You can also call the prospect. This is something that I think people don't really do much when it comes to, finding people on LinkedIn. But believe it or not, you can pick up the phone and call these people. So at the most basic level, you have these 4 different ways to reach out to the people you find on LinkedIn. I just want to kind of go through each 4 of those and talk about some pros and cons and things you should factor in and think about when you're trying to think about how to reach out to the people you find. Now, one of the things about inviting to connect is that it's extremely easy to send invitations and to get connected with very high value, difficult to reach contacts like executives at companies, owners of businesses. So that's great. And there's a big button, click invite to connect, and there's a very good chance that they may accept your request. Once you become connections, you can send messages directly to their LinkedIn inbox. Once you become connections, you probably know this, but you get access to additional contact information, like you might be able to access their phone number or their email address. And one of the best things about inviting to connect and becoming connections is that you can broadcast messages through your newsfeed to all of your connections. And one way to use this is to broadcast updates that deliver value of some sort to your network so you can share industry information, some information of value. So that can either be helpful information, tips, could be something entertaining, something interesting. But one of the great things about broadcasting is that for your connections that see your messages, it helps you to stay fresh in their mind. So maybe you had a meeting with someone in the past. When they see your updates, they're reminded that you're who you are and that you're out there. Now, some cons with inviting to connect is that I personally believe when you send an invitation to someone to say, hey, let's become LinkedIn connections, I personally believe that you need to be cautious about directly selling to that individual. It's not to say that you can't sell to them. It's just that an invitation to connect is almost more collegial or friendly. Let's become connections and network and work together and collaborate. It should not be used as or seen as an invitation for you to try to sell to them. And the reason why I think that's rude is that you may be on LinkedIn to sell your products, to promote your business, to make money, right? But when someone accepts your invitation to connect, they're not accepting the opportunity to buy from you. It's not like a trade show where at a trade show you have vendors and you have buyers, and they're going to exchange, meaning one party's looking to sell and one party's looking to buy. So you have this marketplace where everybody's on the same page and it's okay to be open about directly selling and exchanging information and cards. And that's not what LinkedIn is. LinkedIn is not a marketplace of buyers and sellers. It's definitely a place of sellers. But on the other side of that are networkers is what you should look at them as, because most people are on LinkedIn to either promote their career, connect with and stay in contact with colleagues and friends, and share information. Or the other people are on LinkedIn to sell their own products and services. So they're on there to do the same thing you are, but they're not there to buy your products and services. So I'm not saying that you can't sell to these people, but when you become connections, you should be cautious about directly selling to them. So it's almost as though you need to be a little bit more delayed in how you approach them in terms of when you try to sell to them after connecting, or you might want to go a little bit more indirectly where you try to establish a relationship and a partnership, and then you see what opportunities can come out of that. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Another thing to factor in is I said that you'll get their email address when you become connections, and a lot of people send invitations to connect in order just to solely get someone's email address. Well, the bad news is you have a 50% chance of getting someone's personal email address. For example, I've been on LinkedIn for a very long time, and the entire time that I've been on LinkedIn, I have only displayed and stored my Gmail address. So all of my connections have only gotten my Gmail address, and that's very likely what you'll get when you become connections. There's a 50% chance. And a personal email address is less valuable than a business email address. And so that's something to factor in. Now let's talk about pros and cons for sending LinkedIn emails to the LinkedIn email inbox. So one thing is that when you're prospecting, if you're calling and you're emailing and you're not getting a hold of someone, when you're able to send messages to someone's LinkedIn email inbox, that's an additional way to communicate to them. I've mentioned that it's very difficult to connect with and get a hold of people and get their attention. Well, you should try to contact them multiple times and in multiple ways. And adding a LinkedIn inbox is adding an additional way. So you're just continuing to reinforce all of your other communications. It should not be the only way that you try to communicate, but when you add it to your other mix, you're increasing the different ways that you're communicating and increasing the odds that you're able to get your message through and get connected and get someone's attention. And that's really the only pro for communicating to the prospect's LinkedIn inbox. On the other side of that is that you need to keep in mind that a prospect does not look at their LinkedIn inbox in the same way or as much as they do their business email inbox, meaning they're always looking at their regular email on their phone every time they open their computer throughout the day. They're looking at their LinkedIn inbox much less, and it's a lot easier for emails to get lost. It's good to assume that someone's much more organized and on top of and looking at their business email inbox, and so emails can get lost. Another thing to factor in is that the LinkedIn inbox email viewer window is much smaller than really any other inbox that you might have. And what that means is that when you send messages to your prospect, your message will look longer than it really is or than it would in a regular inbox. What that means is that a prospect will have to scroll more in order to read your email. And if they're having to scroll more, the instant delete rate could be faster and more likely in the LinkedIn inbox. Now let's talk about sending traditional email to contacts or prospects. And so this is sending just a regular email to someone's normal inbox. And so one is that contacts are going to look at their regular email inbox much more frequently throughout the day. Technically, you don't need to become connections to send someone that you find on LinkedIn an email. A lot of times people send invitations to connect just to get the email address. But the reality is that you don't have to do that. You don't have to become connections even if you don't have their email address, because you can guess their email address. And let me show you what I mean by that. If someone works at a company and you know that the website address for that company and you know their first name and their last name, most likely their email address is some combination of those three values. Here are the way those three pieces of information are put together to create email addresses in the business world. You can get these three pieces of information from LinkedIn in a matter of seconds. You click on someone's profile and you'll have this in a matter of 10, 15 seconds. What that means is then you could send an email and guess their email address. You could go through this list and use the most common formats, shoot off an email. If it bounces back, you know you guessed wrong, and then you can send another email after that. Now, this actually works. With about 3 to 4 at the most guesses, you'll eventually have one that stops coming back. And so this works. If you're trying to contact a handful of executives, this is not that big of a deal. You can do some guessing and get their email addresses. Now, if you have a territory and you have hundreds of contacts, or you're reaching out to a bunch of people every day, this can actually become a bit cumbersome, because you shoot off an email, then you start working on something else, then the bounced email comes back, and then you have to go back. And I will not deny that this is cumbersome, but I actually have something for you, which is in the SalesScripter software application. We have a tool that does all that work for you and makes it much less cumbersome, in that we have a tool called the Email Guesser, and you basically plug in those three values: first name, last name, email address, and the software runs all those different combinations and does a test ping on each combination, and will give you a readout of this is the good email address and these are all invalid. And from there, you can then shoot an email to that contact. So this takes all the guesswork really out of it. And with the Email Guesser, when you're using LinkedIn, you can find prospects in your territory or in the accounts you're trying to get into, guess their email address, and then you can actually skip becoming connections. And then what you can do is, because you're not connections, you don't have to worry about being less direct about selling to them. You can be more direct about who you are and why you're reaching out, so you don't have to be cautious. So that's actually what we recommend. We use LinkedIn internally at SalesScripter. We don't establish connections, we guess email addresses. So we find the people on LinkedIn, and then we're sending primarily email addresses to their business account. And by the way, we're not ending up in their personal inbox, because we're not getting those personal email addresses from LinkedIn profiles. Now let's look at calling the prospect, some pros and cons. The majority of people that are just doing LinkedIn prospecting, they're not calling anybody. All they're doing is sending emails, and that's going to greatly reduce their effectiveness. And what I would say is that if you simply add the element of calling someone in addition to your LinkedIn messages or everything else you're doing on LinkedIn, you're going to stand out and you're going to be doing more than the majority. I think that there's a big part of that aren't doing both, right? So if they're on LinkedIn, they feel like, oh, I just became connections, I shouldn't call this person, then that would seem stalkerish. You don't need to worry about that, and you're going to improve your odds of connecting. And there's nothing wrong with calling people you connect with on LinkedIn. And there's no real cons to calling the prospect, other than it is kind of time consuming and grinding and difficult to get a hold of people. Now let's talk about, if you are sending messages, I want to highlight some very important do's and don'ts. So the first don't is, don't make it all about you. I mention this one because I get messages every day from salespeople on LinkedIn, and the messages are all about the prospect. And so I'm going to give you a fictitious email here. Hi, Michael. Thank you for connecting. I'm with Websites Redesigned for You. We're based in Austin, and we're the leader in building websites for 23 years. We provide website design, digital marketing, pay-per-click. Are you looking to redesign your website? Let me know when you're available for a 20 to 30 minute meeting where we can discuss our services. I want to highlight some things in this message. Now remember, the don't that I was talking about was don't make the email all about you. And so this email is all about the salesperson. Look at what I've highlighted here. This is who they work for. This is where they're based. This is how many years they've been in service. This is all the services they provide. Not only is the bulk of their message all about me, but this person's trying to schedule a meeting where he or she can talk to me more about them. They want to schedule a meeting to discuss their services. So this is all about the salesperson. And my advice is don't make it all about you. This is the equivalent of going to lunch with a friend and all a friend does is talk about their own stuff and they don't ask you any questions about you or care about you. It's just a one-sided, self-absorbed conversation. That's what the equivalent of this is. And so if I go back to this slide, which you've seen many times talking about the smart sales system, we've been comparing product selling, which is what the majority of salespeople do, and then what the majority of salespeople on LinkedIn do. And then I'm trying to get you to be more consultative. Well, if someone's in product selling mode, they're going to send that message that I just sent, and they're going to be all about them because that message basically follows this flow. This is who I work for. This is what I'm selling. Do you need what I'm selling? I want to schedule a meeting with you to try to sell to you. That's a product selling email message. And what I would say instead of doing that is instead of making it all about you in your messages, make your message all about the prospect. And the easiest way to do that is if you use the consultative selling approach, you're going to make it all about the prospect because you're going to talk about improvements that they might see or be interested in. You're going to talk about pain points they might have. You're going to ask them questions. You're going to share examples and whatnot. So this is going to be a more all about them approach. I'm going to show you some email templates that apply this and make it less all about you. Don't try to sound like a salesperson trying to sell something. I've said this a lot. This definitely applies. This applies more than ever to LinkedIn prospecting. We've talked about this in the past where you don't want to make your prospects increase guardedness by sounding like a salesperson. This is even more important on LinkedIn because especially when you become connections, like I said, when you become connections, you're almost sending a gesture like, let's collaborate, let's network. You're not asking them to invite you to be connected with them so that you can sell to them. You need to be cautious of not creating that impression. By the way, if I go back to this email, like I said, not only is this all about the seller, the salesperson, but this is very much, I'm a salesperson and I'm trying to sell something to you. This person is trying to sell website redesign. Instead of trying to sound like a salesperson, you can do small things to sound more like a business person, more like a consultant or an advisor. And if I go back here, the consultative selling approach will decrease how much you sound like a salesperson and will help you to sound more like an advisor or a consultant. Don't do the instant pitch. So what the instant pitch is, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but it happens to me almost every single day. A salesperson sends an invite to become connections. Then the prospect at some point accepts the invitation to connect. There shortly after, the salesperson sends an email, and the email is a product selling email. So it's basically what I call this the instant pitch because it's definitely a pitch and it happens right after the prospect sends the invitation. So you may be able to picture that, maybe you've experienced that, but I want to show you just how bad this is by putting some words and examples to this. So let's go back to the very beginning. The salesperson sends an email to invite to connect and it might look something like this. Hi, hey, we have a lot of mutual connections, let's connect. Or, oh, you have an impressive profile, let's connect. Would love to have you in my network. Then step 2 is the prospect says, okay. Now, in theory, when you accept, there's actually not a place to say anything, but figuratively, when someone clicks accept, they're saying, okay, let's network, let's connect, right? Then immediately after, you receive this email. And this is the same email that I showed with you in the previous examples from Websites Redesigned for You. This is the product selling, all about me, I'm a salesperson trying to sell something email. And you receive this right after they say, oh, looks like we have a lot of mutual connections. Bam, now I'm going to try to sell to you. This is the instant pitch. And I personally think this is horrible. There's a couple things that you should do instead of that. The minimum that you could do is have some sort of delay there. So if your prospect accepts the invitation to connect today, maybe wait a week. Wait 2 weeks and then go back and send your product selling message. The other thing you can do is you can have a less pitchy message. So, maybe if you have the consultative selling message, maybe you could send it instantly because it's not as product selling-ish. That would be better. But even if you sell the consultative selling message, I think it's good to just kind of pause a little bit. Let's let the dust kind of settle before you send your message. Don't sell the product. So if I go back to this message here, this salesperson is clearly selling the product. They're asking, are you looking to redesign your website? Can we schedule a meeting where I can discuss my services to you? So this is selling the product. And we've talked about this before, which is don't sell the product, just simply try to start conversations because you're trying to take the prospect through these sales process steps. So if you're at the initial contact step, the next step is not to sell the product. So if you're reaching out for the first time on LinkedIn through a cold email, the next step is not for me to purchase you to rebuild my website, right? We're going to have to talk. We're going to have to get to know each other. You're going to need to learn a little bit more about me. I'm going to need to learn a little bit more about you. That happens in the conversation, happens in the meeting. Sell the meeting instead of selling the product. This will greatly improve your email messages. I talked about how small the window is on LinkedIn, and I've talked about just the general concept of instant delete. You want to send short messages. The longer your message is, the quicker your message will get deleted. Try to stay within 2 to 3 sentences. This is something I've observed in messages that I've received, which is often salespeople or really connections will send a message that if I were to answer what they're asking, I would have to work. Here's some examples of questions that put me to work, right? What do you do? What are you working on? What's your biggest challenge? These are very broad, very open questions. They're not horrible questions to ask, but think about sending this to someone in an email message, right? Let's look at it this way. Think about how long it takes to type, "What do you do?" I mean, it takes between 5 to 10 seconds to type out that question. Now think about how long it would take me to answer that question. Not only would I have to stop there and think and type out some sort of message, so what you're doing is you're trying to sell something or at least build a relationship, and the person that you're reaching out to is not yet interested or expressing interest at this point. So you're the one that's interested, and what you're doing is when you ask a question like this, you're spending a minimal amount of time and you're asking the other person to invest all this time in order for the conversation and discussions to get going. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to flip that. You're the one that's trying to earn their attention, their time, their relationship. So you should be the one investing time. And you need to minimize, at least in the very beginning, how much time they need to respond. Not only is that the more polite thing to do, but if you're trying to get a response and get engaged, it's the more logical thing to do because you want their response to be as easy as possible. So the do here would be to send a message or a question that's more specific and does not put the prospect to work. This happens to me all the time. Someone sends me an invitation to connect, I accept, but then what happens is I notice I start getting their email marketing emails in my inbox. So they get my Gmail email address, and then what I notice is in my promotions tab in Gmail, I'll start getting their company emails. And what happens here is they're basically adding me to their email drip, their email autoresponder, their email marketing software without my consent or without me opting in. This is it's pretty spammy, and you're going to end up with an email list that's really not a great list of leads. I personally don't think it's optimum. If you have no other option in terms of building your email list, I guess go for this. But if you can, what I would recommend is that you engage with them in some sort of way first, whatever that is, maybe through messages, you talk to them, you get a meeting with them, and then you add them to your email marketing, or find a different way to build up your email marketing list maybe through your website or through ads or through some sort of call to action on your website opt-in form. But I think this is a pretty bad practice, and it probably will take you in a direction of getting marked as spam and lead to minimal results. Here's a big one, and this applies to LinkedIn messages as well as traditional email, but don't question if someone has seen your past emails. When someone doesn't reply, don't send a follow-up email saying, "Hey, did you see my last email? Did you get a chance to read my last email? Never heard back from you." I really don't know what the logic is in saying that, I think it breaks rapport. It doesn't really create a good vibe. I guess my assumption would be that salespeople send that because they don't have anything else to send in their follow-up email. So what I would say to you is you have a series of emails where you have something else to send, and in your email number 2, so the do here is just send your next message. Don't mention the message and ask where they're at on that. So those are some do's and don'ts. Now let's apply those concepts and provide you with some email templates that you can use. Before I talk about email messages that you can send, I do want to point out that there's 2 different types of ways that you might be wanting to engage with people that you find on LinkedIn. And so the first way is that you might be either finding people and looking at their profile or becoming connections, and you view this person as a potential networking partner, which means this is someone you want to build a relationship with, and you don't necessarily want to sell to them. You maybe want to get referrals from them and network with them. It could be the case that maybe you've become connections and you've invited them to connect, and it might be more optimum to try to network with them first and build a relationship before you directly sell to them. So this is what I was talking about with being more cautious, which, by the way, this can add more time to the process versus more direct selling. You may find people on LinkedIn that you treat more as prospects, you view as prospects, and you want to pursue more as prospects. Your long-term goal with both of these people might be to sell your product, but your short-term goal and interests are different. The way you communicate with these 2 people can be different whether you're sending emails or calling them. So I'm going to give you one email for the networking partner, and then I'll give you a whole set of emails that you can send to both pretty much. But the networking email just looks something like this, and this is kind of applying, if you become connections. Great to connect with you. I try to reach out to my connections on LinkedIn to learn more about what they do and try to see if there are ways that I can help them to be more successful. I don't know if you're interested in building new networking relationships, but that's why I'm reaching out. Are you interested in having a brief conversation where we can learn more about each other? So just a brief networking email. You can either send this to their LinkedIn, but actually all the email templates I'm going to share with you, you can either send it LinkedIn inbox or business traditional email inbox. So that applies to all. And the reason why is the inbox, whether it's LinkedIn or traditional, it's the same sort of mechanism, right? So the message can be exactly the same. The only thing actually to factor in is maybe you would want to be more brief, or you might need to trim some words if it's going to the LinkedIn inbox. But either way, this isn't too long, but that is something you'd want to keep in mind with these templates, depending on where they're going. So that's just that's for the networking partner. The rest of these can either go to both or are primarily for like prospects. And by the way, I've highlighted something in the message I'm going to show you. I'm not recommending for you to send this message with the highlight. I'm only doing that because the email templates that I'm sharing with you have already been provided through the Smart Sales System as cold email templates. Basically, you can send the exact same cold email templates through LinkedIn or to people you find on LinkedIn. The only thing is that there's an optional sort of softener statement to add at the beginning to kind of, and that's what I've highlighted in yellow. So basically this email template is what you've seen before in the email prospecting chapter of the Smart Sales System. The text in yellow is just what's different so that you can spot the difference. And the hope there is that you don't see this as a whole nother email template that you need to learn, use, or adopt. You just need to know and adopt the first sentence, which is, I came across your profile on LinkedIn because we help CFOs to benefit. So I don't know if you're interested in those, and that's why I'm reaching out. Are you available for a brief 15 to 20-minute meeting? So that's the cold email focusing on your value points. You can send the exact same email, but one that is more tailored to pain points, and it has the same sort of softener at the beginning. Came across your profile on LinkedIn because we help manufacturers to deal with the challenges of pain. Same exact email. Name drop email would be, I came across your profile on LinkedIn because we worked with XYZ Corp and helped them to streamline their transportation and logistics. This ultimately led to them decreasing their cost of goods sold and inventory costs. I don't know if we can help you in the same way, and that's why I'm reaching out. Are you available for a brief 15, 20-minute meeting? And here's a product email. Came across your profile on LinkedIn because we provide IT consulting services, and that includes systems integration, software development. Some ways we differ from other firms out there is that differentiation 1, 2, 3. Are you available for a brief 15-20 minute meeting? This last email template you can either send sort of after you've sent your other emails, or you could send this by itself. And so this email is the keep me in mind email. And this is good, if you sell something that people buy regularly, if you agree that the odds of you timing your email at the perfect time where they need to buy what you sell might be low, then sometimes it can be good to send an email that says, hey, keep me in mind. So if you sell something that's commoditized, an example of this might be if you sell office supplies. You know that your prospect uses office supplies, buys office supplies, is likely buying office supplies from one of your competitors. What you're just trying to get them to keep you in mind and switch at the next time that they're ready to buy. So for you to reach out and say, do you need something today? That might not be optimum because maybe there's a low chance of that. So instead you could send the keep me in mind email, and your goal here is to get the prospect to hang on to your email, keep you in mind. When they need to make a purchase, they come back to your email and contact you. And so this email is kind of coaching them to do that. But came across your profile on LinkedIn because you are a retail shop in our geographic area, and I know that you might need to purchase office supplies from time to time. We provide a full catalog of office supplies, so please keep us in mind the next time you're ready to make a purchase or a change. Some ways we differ from other providers out there is you can purchase on demand. Our billing is simplified. We have lower prices. Let me know if you reach a point where you'd like to schedule a brief call to discuss. So, by the way, I want to point out, just because you sell a commodity or sell office supplies doesn't mean you have to only use this email. You could use the consultative approach for that, but I'm just giving you another option here. Now let's talk about calling the prospect. If I go back to those two different types of people that you might be calling, networking partners and prospects, you would use a different script depending on how you're treating or viewing that person that you're trying to reach out to. So if you're treating the person that you find on LinkedIn, whether they're a connection or just a profile you came across, and you're treating them as a prospect, you can actually use the same exact call script that we provided earlier in the Smart Sales System for general cold calling. Here's the value points cold call script. And like I said, you can use this exact script regardless of whether you got them in a contact database or on LinkedIn. But your introduction, the reason for my call is we help with benefit 1, benefit 2. I actually don't know if you want to improve those areas. That's why I had a question or two. If I could ask you real quick, how concerned are you about this? Who are you using for that? Oh, when I talk with other department managers, they often have challenges with this. It might be productive to have a brief conversation because we provide, and here's some details about what I sell, but I've called you out of the blue, so I don't want to take any more of your time right now. Are you interested in discussing this in a little more detail? And you try to close for the appointment. Now, if you're treating them more as a networking partner, the script is slightly different. And it's much shorter because when you're calling prospects, a lot of times you just want to power through and ask as many questions as you can and get as much information as you can and get around objections. If you're calling people and you're trying to establish a networking relationship, you don't necessarily want to fight that much. If someone's not open to networking, you don't really want to try to get around that objection and it's like forcing someone to like you or date you, right? If someone's not feeling it, you want to let them go and try to find someone else to spend your time with. So here's a shorter script, and it basically just kind of puts yourself out there to see if someone is interested in kind of networking with you. So, hello Tom, this is Michael Halper calling from Sales Scripter. We actually recently became connections on LinkedIn. Have I caught you in the middle of anything? Great. Well, the reason why I'm reaching out is I try to reach out to my connections on LinkedIn to learn more about what they do and try to see if there are any ways that I can help them to be more successful. After that value statement, you can then do a sales takeaway, which is, but I don't know if you're interested in building new networking relationships, but that's why I'm reaching out. And then you could just go for a quick close, right? So at this point, you put yourself out there, you've communicated what you're all about, and you can just kind of validate, are they open to that? So are you interested in scheduling some time to talk in a little more detail? Like I said, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what you're doing and working on. And you can close them for a brief call, or maybe you might end up having a conversation right then. Even if you have a conversation right then, you're progressing to the meeting, and it's becoming an instant meeting, and that's the end of the call script and the end of the cold call. But that's a call script for calling LinkedIn connections that you're networking with. Now if we look at scripts for people that you're meeting with that you find through LinkedIn, if we go back to prospects, the meeting script is exactly the same whether we schedule a meeting with a prospect through LinkedIn or if we schedule a meeting through a cold call or some other format. And so this is the exact same first appointment script where we have some warm-up questions, current environment questions, pain points. Second half of the meeting, we can then talk a little bit more about us. This is what we do. This is how we're different. Depending on what if you think that there might be a fit and reason to talk in more detail, towards the end of the meeting, you can then qualify the prospect to determine is it a legitimate fit and potential for them to move forward. We've talked about qualifying before already in a previous chapter, and then you can close the prospect at the end of the meeting. You could very likely, if you follow this process, you're going to start conversations and schedule meetings with networking partners as well. You can use the networking meeting script, which is slightly different than the first appointment prospect script. It's just a little bit less salesy and more networking. So it starts out with some networking questions. You can certainly then, on the front end, the front end of the networking conversation, you want to try to make it as much as you can about the person you're trying to build a networking relationship with. So you need to learn about what's going on with them. So you can do that by asking current environment questions. Pain questions, you can determine whether or not these are appropriate to ask. These are a bit salesy where you're trying to determine does the person have the pain points that you help to solve. If you're genuinely networking with the other person and it doesn't really matter whether or not they have the pain points, it might not make sense to ask pain questions, but they're here. And same thing with pain points. Whether or not you're trying to sell to them, and when you're networking with LinkedIn contacts or just business contacts, it's a two-way street. You want to spend the first half of the meeting learning about them. Second half of the meeting, hopefully you have the opportunity to talk about you and what you do. And so that's where you talk about your product and your company. And then you would wrap up with some closing questions. And if you're networking, you're not closing on the interest and sale. You're more closing on, does it make sense to work together? What's the best way to work together? Do you want to continue to work together and stay in touch? So that's pretty much it. I hope that helps, and let us know if you have any questions.